Good afternoon and welcome once again to the Committee for Workers International weekly broadcast. We'd like to welcome all our viewers to our weekly discussions on different aspects of the coronavirus and the global crisis facing capitalism. Before we start today's discussion, I'd like to invite all of our viewers to subscribe to our YouTube channel at CWI Media and to watch us there if it's all possible. Now, of course, in the course of the last week, we've seen further twists and developments in the global crisis which is unfolding. We've seen a general switch into the epicenter of the crisis is now clearly rooted in the Americas. There's a dramatic worsening of the situation in Pakistan and India. The turmoil which is taking place in the United States continues unabated, with new revelations by former collaborators of Donald Trump now knifing him in the back. We saw a disastrous election rally for him, all of which points to the fact that Trump is now in serious trouble in the elections which are taking place in November. And of course we also see within that an increase in the tensions between the different imperial powers taking place, particularly China. We've had the clashes with India intensify. You see a worsening in the situation with relations north and south. So there's many different aspects that we could discuss, but today we're going to concentrate back into a development that we started our broadcast on, and that is the horrific situation which is developing in India at this particular stage. And we're very privileged today to be joined by two members of the new Socialist Alternative in India, supporters and members of the CWI. We have Jagadish from Bangalore and Yuvraj from Pune. So a very warm welcome to you. And we'll also be joined in London with Sanan, a member of the International Secretariat of the CWI. So perhaps Yuvraj, we could begin with you. What is the current situation with the corona crisis in India? And what is the Modi regime, which is of course one of the most reactionary right-wing governments that we have internationally at this stage, what's it been doing recently? Yuvraj. Hello, Yuvraj. Are you still with us?
Hello, comrades.
Yes,
Am I
we can.
audible? Okay, yeah. Okay, so comrades, the corona situation continues to worsen. Currently, India is fourth in terms of number of cases, which stands currently at 440,000, with 15,000 adding each day, which means now with the current rate, in a matter of week, we'll have 100,000 more, So it is, it's really rapidly growing, and it's very clear that we have still not hit the peak. But, it's not just about the numbers. No one expected the kind of corona to disappear just like that. More than that, I think the way Modi government, as Comrade Tony rightly said, one of the most reactionary government, chose to respond to this particular crisis, I think that has fallen flat on the face. And as a result, millions of people are now exposed to the acute, not just health crisis, but economic crisis. If I have to go back just shortly to March, which is when Indian government woke up, till it was busy with all its, political intrigues, but it suddenly woke up in the third week of March, and in a, style very typical to Modi government, it announced the national lockdown quite suddenly without any preparation. And consequently, we have seen, I would not go into the lockdown and the miseries it has caused to the millions of people, but then kind of government could have used the lockdown to kind of strengthen the healthcare system or mobilize the medical resources to deal with this particular crisis. But it has not at all. It chose to it reduced the whole thing of lockdown into jingoism, into chauvinism, engaging people into all kind of fruitless things. And as a result, now after around 3 months, we see that on one side the corona cases are going up like anything, and our health system is kind of completely collapsing and not able to deal with the crisis. I mean, there are multiple cases where patients are being tossed from one hospital to another because there are no beds. Then as you know, India has quite a tiny public healthcare system, and most of the healthcare. I mean, if I talk about urban areas, then almost 80% of the beds are with private healthcare industry. And there has been naked commercialization of healthcare in past 2 decades, and this private healthcare, it has either chosen not to operate because it won't see the profits, or those big hospitals, which are treating the corona patients, they are charging, I mean, they have resorted to such a naked profiteering. I'll just give a figure that many of the hospitals are charging as high as 25,000, and this is in fact minimum. In many cases, they're charging even up to 50,000 per day. And bear in mind, 50,000 is the monthly salary of an upper middle class. So for working class, 50,000, I mean, there are many people for whom 50,000, 60,000 is their yearly income. And in past 3 months, there is not even there is no income. And in such a situation, private healthcare industry is really kind of looting the people. So that's what is, really happening. And the kind of condition of the medical staff, that is the doctors, nurses, all the sanitary workers, that is worse. They're grossly underpaid. They do not really have any equipments. And as a result, especially in past few weeks, we see hospital after hospital, regions after regions, nurses and doctors are unfortunately compelled to boycott COVID duties. They're simply saying, no, we can't do it anymore. So that's, what is happening. So the very particular way in which the union government
I think we lost you there a bit, Yuvraj.
uh, I mean, if I have to go to some current developments, Modi government in past especially 3 weeks now, it has raised its hand. It has now pushed the responsibility to regional government, that is state governments, to deal with the crisis. I mean, now it is up to state governments to decide on the lockdown, to decide on the healthcare policies. So this has been done, but then Modi government has really not given any resources in terms of testing kits, in terms of medicines, and in terms of funds. There are no funds with the state governments, and still they are asked to deal with the situation, which is extremely horrible. And at the same time, no state governments, regional governments, has really shown the guts to stand up to the center and say nothing. You need to provide these resources, otherwise we can't deal with the crisis. But it just kind of simply chooses to piggyback on the Modi government. So, Tony, I mean, this is the kind of situation of the corona crisis in India.
It obviously is an horrific situation which is currently unfolding. But what's the state of the Indian economy, Yuvraj? And we hear a lot in the capitalist media about the so-called growth that's taking place in India. And is it really possible to imagine that you can have a really sustainable growth and development of Indian society under capitalism?
I mean, that's a big joke to say that there is a growth. I mean, the media and the government may like to make a fuss, but there are no takers in India, even among the supporters of the this particular BJP. There are no takers for that there is any kind of growth happening. Comrade Tony, as you rightly said, there is no chance of any real growth under capitalism. And this is not a general statement. I think the kind of crisis Indian economy is experiencing, it is not a kind of a regular cyclic kind of trend. It is a structural crisis of the capitalism. As we know, under capitalism, it is a tiny section of bourgeoisie, which would accumulate all the wealth, and it would not provide any decent wages or livings, or it cannot create the jobs. And this is the classical, case, and there is a massive unemployment, the real kind of the purchasing power that has continuously gone down in past decade, and as a result, now Indian economy is kind of fully caught up in financial trap. If we go back to 2008 when there was a global financial meltdown, Indian economy was not as badly hit by the crisis as other countries, but that's no more case. In past 12 years, Indian economy has so tightly integrated to the financial networks, and it has grossly been the whatever minimum growth that India has experienced in past 5 6 years, it has been because of the financial flows. I mean, I have a report of RBI. RBI is a Central Bank of India. This report of RBI, it has actually evaluated the growth between 2013 and 17, and the report concludes that whatever rise in demand, that or rise in consumption, that has been witnessed, most of that has been because of the debt. The sectoral deployment of the bank credit, like the banks where they actually deployed the credit, the figures are quite astounding. 96% of this bank credit has been towards really our consumption has grown in India. That has not been because of any increase in wages or real purchasing power. That has been solely because of the rise in debts. And these are the words of central bank. So it's not just consumption; it's the investment. Everything had been debt driven, and this particular debt thing, the financial thing, as we know, the financial this financial version of capitalism is the most fictitious capital, and even at a global level, we see the whole edifice is unraveling, and so is the case with India. The bond markets are in acute crisis. The six mutual funds of the Franklin Templeton, they have Franklin Templeton was compelled to shut them down. And in response, RBI has pumped literally billions of rupees in past 6 months, but to no gain. The financial system it continues to escalate. So yeah, I think there is absolutely. What Indian economy is experiencing is the structural crisis of capitalism, and Modi government is acting as if there's nothing like that. It is making all the false claims of attracting big investment, the companies which are moving out of China, it would attract them, and all that's, it's a rubbish. Whatever governments, like 3 years back, Modi government had, or I think 4 years back, they had announced this Make in India, that has been utter failure. So I think all this talk about Indian economy growing is a hogwash, and the structural crisis of capitalism yet again proves that on the basis of capitalism there cannot really be any growth, and we must take the battle for socialism forward. That's what is the clear message.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Yuvraj. I think that was a pretty clear indication of how capitalism is not going to be able to develop society at all in India. Now perhaps we could turn to Jagadish in Bangalore. We've had a lot of reports, of course, of the recent clash between India and China, which is a reflection of the growing global international tensions which is taking place. Perhaps, Jagadish, you could explain what lies behind this current clash between India and China.
These days, rumor mill is turning wartime. The activities making out military all in their times, starting on
Jagadish, if you just hang on.
China. You say something. Can you hear me?
No, I think we've got a little bit of a technical problem.
Can you hear me?
That's better, yeah. Okay, try now.
Can you hear me now?
No, we've lost you again. I don't know. No, I think we've lost you, Jagadish.
No, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Okay, we can move on.
No, we can't. I think we've lost you,
I'm not able
Jagadish.
to hear you.
No, I think we've lost you, Jagadish. We'll have to try and get back to you in a little bit. So perhaps we could turn to Sanan. Maybe, Sanan, you could comment on the question of this recent clash between India and China.
Yes, Tony, this is a kind of one of the very serious issues that is opening up in the South Asia, particularly in terms of control of the resources in the region. As we know, China is becoming a very dominant force in the world, and then also India was growing as well to an extent, etc., etc. The idea that at the moment, with the like Yuvraj explained, that the kind of economic downturn, that kind of destruction faced by Indian economy, there is a talk in India, kind of in the Modi quarters by the state, is that somehow they can attract some manufacturing towards India away from China, given the kind of trade war going on between US and China. This is kind of a false imagination. However, of course, India is used as a tool in order to contain the Chinese influence in the region. However, but we can see that China already kind of made very much deals in Pakistan with the kind of Belt and Road as part of the project. And also they have made inroads in Nepal, but in Burma and in Sri Lanka, etc., etc. Almost looks like the India is surrounded by the Chinese influence and etc., etc. And so we saw the Trump kind of taking kind of decisive step in order to challenge the rise of China. But it looks like Modi has taken the side. That's why it looks like Modi taken the side of the Trump, and then making certain kind of inroads into kind of trying to maintain its influence in South Asia, but also trying to kind of have some influence in the South China Sea. So the thing is, with the as part of that, the clash of, we don't know exactly who provoked, what happens, etc. What we know is that there was a military build-up taking place for a while in that particular part. And also China is building certain structures, etc., etc. Of course, it increased economic ties with India, as well as, of course, trying to kind of create a sort of way to kind of trying to bring all the commodities that may come through the Belt and Road Initiative into China and so on and so forth, the transport facilities they've been building. So we don't know the exact reason, but we know the geopolitical reason, which is the clash that is open up. That is kind of damaged. Is it irreversible damage between these two nations? We don't know. At this particular stage, is that they cannot go into a full-out, all-out war at this stage. However, the continuous clashes and things like continue to happen. But this is kind of in this process of using the Indian state, India as a kind of a tool to maintain some support for the West. Who is going to pay for it is the people, the poor in the country. And all the military buildings, spending on the military, whipping up the Indian nationalism, justifying spending on it, etc., etc., will only strengthen the Modi regime, and the losers will be the poor people in the country.
Okay, right. Well, thanks for that, Sadan. I don't know, is Jagadish able to reconnect with us? No. No, okay, we haven't. Well, maybe Yuvraj, if we could return to you. Well, we got Jagadish back. Hi, Jagadish. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? No. Okay. Well, Yuvraj, I think we'll have to take a few further points with you. Now, under Modi, we've seen him introduce draconian anti-labour laws. What are they, and what's been the response of the trade unions to it? We've had two strong communist parties, the CPI, the CPIM, and what are they calling for in this crisis? Maybe if you could just elaborate a few points on that.
Okay. Yeah. So, there has been, quite draconian changes brought to the labor laws. Government has chose to abolish as many as 36 labor laws in certain states, so like Uttar Pradesh, which is ruled by equally scandalous right-wing government. There are only now 4 labor laws. So all kind of protection for the even the bare minimum that has been removed, and how are the established left parties are reacting to that. Unfortunately, they are still resorting to kind of some kind of tokenist measure of calling some protest in this form or that form, but they have really not chosen to go ahead and call out for things like a general strike with kind of radical demands. It is still clear that that's still contained with the kind of reformist demands asking for this gains or that gains, but we have really not seen any change in approach by the left parties or trade unions in general. Another thing is that if you look at the way the trade unions have been organized, they have been hugely concentrated in the certain government sectors or organized sectors like bank unions, but the kind of large number of unorganized workers, they have really not been effectively mobilized, and consequently, the bourgeoisie has been able to utilize the issues like regionalism, the issues like caste, the issues like all the kind of petty issues to pit one section of working class against another. So such policies by the trade unions, that their failure to grapple with this kind of situation that has already led to the things like the protest or the general strikes. Even the general strikes at times, they tend to be a bit tokenist. We could see that thing, but at the same time, there has been really quite a growing push from the below, and the trade union bureaucracy, which in a way holds the workers, that has the way the things are going. And if we really could see the working class movement steering itself in the better direction, then this particular bureaucracy, which in a way holds the workers, that could be challenged. And we see that there is definitely growing pressure. The kind of right-wing trade union, which is affiliated to the BJP, even that has been compelled to call for a protest. So that is the kind of class situation which is developing, and then this is so reckless. The attacks on the labor laws, these are so reckless that even a section of bourgeois economists, it realizes that such draconian laws are not really going to help the recovery. Certain or it could lead to workers there could be a rise in workers militancy. So certain industrialists came out and saying that, well, we should really balance out the relations between the workers and the factory owners. They came up with these terms, kind of indicating a bit of apprehensiveness even among section of bourgeoisie. But this particular government, it represents the worst prejudices of the bourgeoisie, and which is why it has chosen to act very savagely. In the coming period, we could see more struggles coming up. But the kind of trade union bureaucracy, it still tries to hold down the struggles, and it has really not gained the sense of the changing objective situation, and we do not see it prepared to kind of give that kind of subjective leadership.
No, that's clear on the trade unions, but I mean, what exactly are the communist parties arguing for?
Can I get into the discussion now?
Yeah. Well, if you're here, yeah, maybe Jagadish, you could take up that point on the Communist parties, if you're back with us. What are they advocating and putting forward?
I'm sorry, I lost most of the meeting, but anyway.
Sorry, Jagadish, I think we've lost you again. Sorry, Jagadish, we've lost you again. There's obviously a connection problem between Bangalore and here. Yuvraj, maybe we'll come back to you then. If you could just... Sorry, Jagadish, you're not coming through. I don't think it's going to work. Sorry, apologise for that. There's obviously a technical glitch there. Yuvraj, maybe you could take back the point about the Communist parties, what they're putting forward.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of class action, the Communist parties are already called, kind of the trade unions affiliated to these parties that already kind of called for a day of protest. And again, they have called one more on 3rd of July. But clearly that's not, sufficient. In fact, the day of protest, perhaps with the current form, it may not really mean much. It may not really lead to the kind of representation of the outcry of the working class. There is really not any program beyond just calling this a day of protest. There is lack of program. It is not really been given by these parties. We, on the contrary, we call out for. We appeal that there should be a general strike, and the whole working class, it must, kind of come out on the streets and, refuse to be, being savagely attacked by this government.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Well, maybe I could turn to Sanan as well now. Touching briefly on the question of the Indian economy again. I mean, can India continue to grow, and what does the future hold for it?
That is the key question, Tony, because, I mean, Yuvraj explained the kind of the situation that is the economy is facing in terms of number of key factors and some of the important factors. The capital economics, the global leader in terms of measuring all these things, they predicting 1% growth in 2020. But in India, some economists are saying 4% growth, and then of course then we'll be back to 6% plus double digits growth in few years time, etc., etc. All these things, all this kind of argument is now destroyed earlier by Yuvraj, and it's all kind of wishful thinking. Even before the corona crisis, Indian economy going towards recession, and of course this economy is kind of two important factors driven this economy so far: the debt and as well as the service sector. So of course the mining and things like that as well, but mainly service sector and so on, which had a massive hit currently. Some of them are permanently closed in many industries, and a huge number of workers gone back to villages, not like in the past. They would not get a job there, but also they don't have any prospect of coming back into cities and working and so on and so forth. We are talking about the 5th largest economy in the world. When you say that, then there is also a question in relation to how to understand this. And if you look at it, this I think Oshin can put up this slide to kind of show that how this kind of inequality that exists in India. There are 120 dollar billionaires in India, about 50,000 dollar millionaires in India. With them, a small but significant layer of upper middle class, well-to-do layer. And this is the economy. It's totally separate from that rest of the India. This is 1%. The inequality is so much. 1%. Actually, they even calculated the number. 16 people control more than 70% of the Indian economy. 16. Basically, it's not even 1%. So it is such an inequality exists. The growth is linked to that particular population, a tiny, small elite in comparison to rest of the India. And that is that's why the government now going on the offensive, like Yuvraj pointed out, Can imagine in this particular situation, they're pushing ahead with the privatization, made no effort whatsoever to deal with the crisis, but at the same time suspending all labor laws except for all the labor laws and declaring war at working class and rest of the population, basically using this particular position. That's why it's a kind of the lack of demand that has been created now is not going to re-emerge. That's the huge problem. Unemployment increased from 8.7 to, according to the official figures, 23.5. Of course, we don't believe in the official figures. It's massively much more higher than that, and then it's already hovering around, and it's not going to return back to the normality just like that, returning back to the. And also the crisis of food crisis, and food supply is broken. Now the central government is putting the responsibility into the state government in terms of how to deal with the kind of food supply and so on. So that it creates a situation where huge number of population is facing starvation. Starvation is like not seen before in the history. Already these about 21%, I think, according to Oxfam, is the 21% of the world poor children dying by hunger is actually from India. And then nearly 300,000 children are expected to die out of this crisis. It's horrendous when you think about that particular number. It's terrible. Such is the situation that opened up for the rest of the India. And the so-called fiscal policy is basically rescuing the top elite in order to maintain the growth, but also kind of stop the kind of fleeing of the capital away from India and etc. etc. But another factor, the kind of when you ask this question about growth, where is it going to come from, is that also sort of so-called FDI, the kind of foreign direct investment, etc. Already about $95 billion been taken out of the stock market already, which is about 4 times that of what happened in 2007 and 2008. This is like in opposition to this argument that they're going to attract more foreign direct investment. And this again, getting this manufacturing from China is an impossible task because its Chinese economy is massive, 4 times or 5 times of that of India, but as well as the kind of the transport of workers and the infrastructure that exists like in Shanghai is unthinkable in India. And it's impossible to imagine that India will be able to come out with any sort of that kind of an investment in order to kind of produce or satisfy the commodity, the kind of the demand that will be if it is created in the future. That is a kind of a false belief. Basically, there is no growth. There is going to be a prolonged crisis that is facing in India. That's the kind of perspective that exists right now. And of course, there could be some shift, of course, towards India, kind of some sort of investment, etc., which will not be enough in what form or in any way in order to maintain growth or in supply, particularly the kind of industrial commodities, etc.
So it's obviously a very bleak perspective that we have there. Now we have horrific reports of the caste division and caste discrimination which exists there. There's many nationalities which exist in India, including the Tamil population in Tamil Nadu. Could you outline the situation on the caste question and the different nationalities, and how as Marxists we approach those particular questions?
It's another important question that we have to deal with, Tony. That's what we say in India is that balkanization of India is possible as part of the perspective in the coming period, etc. So what that means, at this stage it may not be visible. What that means is that this particular time where these massive crises and the dire poverty and so on and so forth that exist, and the Modi government is pushing for trying to implement one nation, one language, etc. from the top. Already there is resentment against implementation of like a Hindi as one language, etc. in a number of states, and also the cultural changes and so on, which will face a direct challenge because this is taking place at the very same time all the labor rights are attacked, majority of the democratic rights are attacked, and then strengthening the right-wing forces, etc., which is in itself a contradiction. How can you suppress all democratic rights, take away the culture and language right, and create one India, which India is which is a prison house of various nationalities, it's not possible. That will emerge, come into fore at one particular point. And then that's why we say the balkanization of India is possible. It won't be a quick break. Of course, the national question ebbs and flows in different ways in different states. It's different in Kashmir and in Tamil Nadu and rest of the states, etc. But from Kashmir to Tamil Nadu, all over the India, that particular friction exists, which can be accelerated given the current conditions. That's what we are saying. But it's added by the authoritarian regime and the economic challenges that's opening up for right now. So, but while we say that, CWI stand for the right to self-determination of the nationalities, which we argue also that can be won through a united class struggle, coming together as a confederation in the southern subcontinent, but also the South Asian continent, together to plan the resources in the region for everybody on a voluntary basis, a confederation. And this is what we put forward. Unfortunately, the so-called Marxists in India, the CPM and the CPIM, the Stalinist organization, do not stand for this right. They always stood for the kind of united India in a very abstract sense, but also oppose these kind of, whenever these kind of demands, the democratic demands come up in the in different states. Quite incredibly, there are a number of like Maoist organizations also who claim that they support the right to self-determination, etc. Simply, but quite incredibly recently, given this particular clash we talked about in Ladakh, the CPIML put up a statement where they argue that, you know, our soldiers died and why Indian government is not doing it, in almost read very nationalistic united India perspective, and so on. So we do not take that particular view. We take the view of supporting the democratic rights of all nationalities, language rights, cultural rights, including religious rights. We have to mention that, emphasize that at this stage where predominantly where Muslim populated areas, massive discontent exists. We saw the kind of a protest that opened up earlier with implementation of the Citizenship Act and so on and so forth before. So that it's not over. That particular process is not over. Maybe the lockdown is holding back number of issues at this stage, fear factor and various aspects, particularly the health factor. I have to mention that, of course, in relation to that, 68 million people in India do not have access to health care. They don't go to health hospitals and so on and so forth, and they are left alone. And they they're going to contain this particular crisis is very, very, very questionable.
Okay. Well,
and on the caste question, sorry if I may, is that there's another particularly important point, that is actually there is a caste, the concretization of the kind of caste discrimination is taking place a bit more. If you look at the, for example, Tarai, a huge number of people living in the shanty towns, the cleaning hand is a luxury for these people. And also this kind of the social distancing and this cleanliness, all these various aspects that's locked down and etc. help to reinforce the caste discrimination in India. It's created more problem because most of the oppressed section, when I'm talking about this particular population, 68 million who do not have an access to healthcare, are most oppressed section economically, but also on a caste basis. And they can be pushed back into feudal relations in order to survive, in order to go by on a daily life, because they're all daily wage earners, quite a lot of them, and then relied on this particular kind of little black economy as well. Some of them, they are all shut down and they are starving. They would push back further into feudal relationship, in bonded labor, etc. The kind of concretization of the caste kind of discrimination taking place right now. In this situation, what we would advance is that just sticking to kind of reformist ideas such as quota system, the positive discrimination, which is number of left are fetishists about, which we will welcome, of course, is not enough. Why it is not enough is that it is only some kind of wealthy families can benefit out of that. Most of them are out of this system. That is the problem. We have to link this particular demand against the struggle against the caste question to economic demands such as the health service should be free for all. Education should be their right, fundamental rights should be free for all. Unless you demand these things, the talking against the caste question is a bit of an abstract thing. We question that because the CPM and the CPI, other left, some of them, they kind of fall back behind the identity politics in order to gain certain credit. They made a historical mistake in the past, not able to take on the struggle of the most oppressed section in the country. In order to now, from that particular position, they jumped into kind of falling behind the identity politics. All sort of identity politics, this way or other way, defend the existence of the caste system as such. What we are talking about in CWI is abolishing the caste system, annihilation of caste question, caste system, etc. That's why it's so important to link this particular struggle to the economic demand, but then again, once and for all, to abolish the caste system, it needs to be linked to changing the social relation altogether. This means this particular struggle is inherently linked to the struggle against capitalism and establishing a planned economy, a socialist economy in this country. And that's why it is so important that these particular ideas need to be advanced, taken up in India.
No, that's very important points there, Senator, I think you've developed. I mean, you've got the far-right fascistic RSS, which is being used by Modi. But how do you see the prospects for the Modi government, and how do you see the role of the left in India at the moment?
The Modi government is stronger at this stage. Of course, after this crisis, they're going to come weaker, much weaker. They are making all these things from the weak point of view, basically. And however, having said that, we have to take the RSS threat very seriously. It's very real. The core of the RSS is strong, not just in kind of support they get from the Modi government, the state, but also in number. There are huge numbers if you investigate how much they are involved in this particular attack against the minorities and other religious communities, etc., etc. So we must take this seriously. That's why we advance slogans such as we need to form committees in different communities and workplaces, etc., which includes workers from all religion and trade union, militant trade union and the militant left, etc., etc., come together to form defense committees as well as committees to kind of provide food supply, etc., and so on and so forth. And through that, we can unite the strength. There is a massive need for uniting the strength of the left and the militant layer in the society to come establish a platform. This is a vital need of this hour in India. We are going to witness the mass death in India. Horrendous condition is taking place in terms of the attack on the labor right and everything. This is unprecedented in the history of India. At the scale of this nature on various levels is taking place. Left should not be silent in this. Unfortunately, the leadership of the left, the communist parties, are incapable of providing the fight back. They are just talking about supporting the Congress party, national unity along that line, etc., etc. They are imprisoned by their electoral politics, defending their own position, but also maintaining the union position, etc., etc. I think we appeal to the rank and file leaders and members to rebel against this particular situation, push your leadership, if not take the leadership of these organizations, come forward, establish a platform where we can come together in a federal form without compromising the independence of the organizations, putting forward and coming to an agreement with a far-sighted perspective and socialist policies, and create a weapon to fight back and push back the attack on the working class, as well as save the lives. Lots of lives at stake at this particular period in India, save the lives of tens of thousands of children and the workers and the poor people and the oppressed caste. And I think we would request a discussion with all militant left and all the trade unionists to see the possibility of coming forward to establish this kind of platform.
Well, that's very clear, Senator, in terms of outlining a combative program to fight against the far right and the Modi regime. Now, very briefly, is Jagadish still with us? I don't know. Can we hear a final? I'm sorry, Jagadish. The sound is just not coming through. It's just not there. We obviously have a communication problem today. But maybe Yuvraj, we just give the final word to you very briefly. What are the prospects of building support for revolutionary socialist alternative policies in the coming period in India?
Okay, yeah, that's really quite an important question. So there is a huge contradiction that has already built up. On kind of on the surface, it hello, yeah. Yeah, on the surface, it looks like the government, that this right-wing government, is completely in charge of the situation. You know,
So, Jagadish, sorry, could you mute your speaker? We're picking up a feedback from you there. Okay,
hello.
Yuvraj.
Okay, I'll resume. Yeah, so on the surface, it appears that this government is completely in charge of the situation. I mean, it has got huge money power. It has subjugated all the various institutions of democracy, including election commission and even the Supreme Court. And the whole media is kind of going ahead with all kind of false reports and empty rhetorics. So on one side, that's what appears to be the situation, but as we have been repeatedly saying, this is really not the real situation. This is not the representative situation. As Comrade Senan rightly said, left parties have chosen to go along with Congress, but then we clearly deny kind of refuse that position, because notwithstanding the situation, there has been continuous kind of increase in the kind of class opposition, or the kind of class opposition to this particular government in past 5-6 all through this 5-6 years, because this government has utterly failed on each and every account, not just economy, but even the handling of the kind of the national question or the corona crisis. In and out, this government has utterly failed on each and every account, and the living conditions of the masses, of the working class, has continuously deteriorated in all these 6 years. And as a result, there have been massive increase in a working class kind of the opposition, or the working class opposing this particular government. There have been massive worker strikes. There has been quite an heroic farmer struggles. But then, because of the lack of opposition, or because of the lack of, subjective factor and the right kind of, Marxist leadership, we have seen the government still kind of, holding on to its power. But with Corona crisis, that all this could, this could significantly change. The situation at least provides, it opens up the way for such struggles. Like, for example, health system, as I already said, the capitalist kind of the profiteering, which is at the heart of the capitalism. Because of that, we see the kind of people are being left without any cure, and the situation is likely to escalate. But not just health crisis, the economic crisis. The people do not really have an income, and there are no prospects of new jobs being created, or forget new jobs, but even the economy, which was at the situation, or the recovery could much longer time, and the government has refused to support people in any sense. So all this situation is so precarious that, as I even earlier mentioned, that there has been really a lot of push from below, and even the right-wing trade union has been compelled to announce or observe some kind of protest. Obviously, it is false, and but then that kind of indicates the changing period and the changing times. So I think, I mean, there is now the government would like to use the all the kind of right-wing agendas of the caste, of the religion, but I think there is no going back. The naked loot of the capitalism, this is becoming more and more apparent, and there are really real prospects of the fight for socialism opening up. Obviously, it will not happen on its own. I think it is for the left parties and genuine kind of Marxist forces like us to provide the program, the slogans, and the demands for that kind of struggle. But we definitely, see those kind of periods opening up.
Okay, well, thanks, Yuvraj. I think that's given a good roundup of the discussion we've had today on the crisis which is currently unfolding in India. So, in conclusion, we'd appeal to you to join up with us in the CWI in a struggle for a better world, for a socialist world, and against global capitalism. If you'd like to read more of our analysis, go to our website at socialistworld.net. Follow us on Twitter at CWI Socialist, like our page on Facebook, Socialist World-CWI, and follow us on Instagram at Socialist World. And once again, we particularly appeal to you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at CWI Media. But we'd also make an additional appeal once again that we need your support. Join us in the struggle. Donate to our finances to help us improve our productions, to improve our interventions of building the struggle for a powerful socialist alternative to this crisis of global capitalism. So once again, we thank our viewers for joining us. Apologies to Jagadish for the technical problems and communications that we had with Bangalore today. But nevertheless, we'll be back next week examining another aspect of this global unprecedented crisis of capitalism. In the meantime, stay safe, join the struggle and join the fight for socialism.